Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to the Greek Embassy. It's a great pleasure having you with us this evening. And of course, it's a pleasure and privilege to have with us Professor Psalidopoulos, who will deliver a lecture on the evolution of economic thought in modern Greece. And now I will ask Ambassador Nasika to deliver the opening remarks.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Once again, here in this room, welcoming Professor Psalidopoulos. And although I believe that one has not to introduce him because he is well known, and he's well known also in Washington, but I will try to remind you of some details of his very rich curriculum. Dr. Psalidopoulos is Professor Emeritus at the Department of Economics at the University of Athens, his alma mater, where he took his first degree in economics and followed postgraduate studies in politics, sociology, and economics at the Free University of Berlin in Germany. He was fellow at Duke University, Princeton University, and visiting professor at King's College, London. From 2015 to 2020, he was alternative director at the IMF. Before joining the IMF, he was the holder of the Constantine Karamanlis Chair in Hellenic and European Studies at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Tufts University, for the academic years 2010 to 2014. His research focuses on national traditions in the history of economics and the relation between economic thought, economic policy, and good governance. Professor Psalidopoulos has written extensively in his academic field of expertise, and his latest book, A History of Modern Greek Economic Thought, will be published this year.
In 2 months.
In 2 months' time. So his intervention, I mean, his presentation will be on Greek economy. We have some good news. Since Greece, from a macroeconomic perspective, finds itself now on the right track. We are making the headlines, but this time for the good reasons. The Economist magazine, as you might know, voted Greece Country of the Year for 2023. And I think that this is because we are rewarded for the significant progress. All this has happened not by a magic wand, but there is some effort behind, and there is some thinking behind. So we are looking forward, dear professor, to enlightening us tonight. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, staff of the Embassy, for preparing today's lecture. It's a great honor for me to be here and to address you and acquaint you with my recent research on the evolution of economic thought in modern Greece, to be published according to the publisher on April 16. It will be in the bookstores. In order for me to acquaint you with what will follow, allow me to spend some minutes with a crash course on the evolution of economic ideas globally, so that we see how the Greek example fits into the whole story. Now, the ancient world had economic thought. Religion, Christian religion, Arabs, Muslim religion also had directives as to the Greek economy, and how governors of things, being kings or other kind of leaders, should follow policies. Philosophers jumped in during the Middle Ages, and then an economic discourse which was more in-depth concerning economic issues started evolving. Mercantilism, the economic thought centered around trade and the importance of trade and how trade should be supported by governments, was the dominant economic doctrine. Whereas in France we had physiocracy, which laid emphasis on agriculture, and in German-speaking nations, Habsburg Empire and Prussia, we had cameralism, which were all variants of a discourse centered around a strong state that would pursue the interests of the commercial class, mostly. Then we have classical political economy after 1776 with Adam Smith. Political economy as a concept becomes common, and Adam Smith is the one who made political economy a totally new scientific field. And David Ricardo followed, and then John Stuart Mill took the school to new heights until the middle of the 19th century. Of course, during the dominance of classical political economy, socialist ideas circulated. You see the names. In Germany, we had another tradition, the German Historical School. In the United States, classical political economy was not very strong. American institutionalism was born. And after 1871, the neoclassical school emerged in Austria, in the United States, in Lausanne, in London. These authors of the neoclassical school were followed by others, and until today, the neoclassical school is the most dominant economic doctrine. However, due to the Great Depression, John Maynard Keynes, who started his career as a neoclassical economist, developed his own theory, known as Keynesian theory. And after the Second World War, Keynesianism was merged with the neoclassical thinking by Paul Samuelson. Friedman introduced monetarism. Hayek was resurrected, so to speak. He was very well known from the interwar years. And today we live in a situation where economic thought is fragmented. Many schools exist: behavioral economists, experimental economists, new institutionals, neoclassicals, new Keynesians, post-Keynesians, you name it. So we have many variants of thought, and this is the background to what is to follow. I hope it was understandable. Now, Greece, economics in Greece, according to my story, went through three phases. The first one lasted for 100 years, and economics was simply a topic that was taught at the law school of the University of Athens. Nothing more, nothing less. At the turn of the 19th century, of course, public finance was also introduced in the curriculum. Then, from 21 to 71, 1921 to 1971, an economics degree was awarded at Greek universities, combined with political science, combined with social sciences, with accounting, but it was not an autonomous degree. The autonomous degree came after 1971, when during the dictatorship, the curricula changed and you could get an economics degree after 4 years of study. And if you wanted to do a business degree, you did a business degree, an accounting degree at another department. So we have this kind of internationalization in Greece as of 1971 and until today. So let's get back to the first period. I don't want to spend much time here, but just bits and pieces. We have Enlightenment ideas and Amandios Korais trying to make the Greeks aware of what went on in France during his times, and the need for individuals to stand up, fight for independence, fight against the Ottoman Empire. Because Ottoman thought and religious Orthodox thought merged into some postulates that left the individual as an obedient person who would not pursue luxury. Public interest went before personal interest, and all this would lead the individual to an afterlife in paradise. Now, of course, many intellectuals objected. Hellenic Nomarchy is a treatise written by an unknown author, and there we have descriptions about how the economy should take shape in a free Greece. But the economic analysis in this treatise is very poor. In fact, the author says that progress doesn't come from productive work, as the classical political economy schools would say, doesn't come through industry or commerce or whatever. You get rich if you are lucky. This is a quote. The same applies for commercial encyclopedias. A certain Nicholas Papadopoulos was the author of and the editor of an encyclopedia which promoted the idea that merchants were a driving force in the field of ideas toward independence. And this was true, of course. But again, the encyclopedia did not advance mercantilist ideas. Then came, during the decade of the War of Independence, many foreigners, people who were very close to Jeremy Bentham, the British philosopher, who is the father of utilitarianism. Others came from France and were supporters of Saint-Simon, who believed in industrialization. But these intellectuals came and went because political developments after the death of Capodistrias led to the Germans, the Bavarians taking over. And with them, the regents and then King Othon Bavarian cameralism introduced itself and imposed itself upon the Greeks. Now, cameralism is a doctrine that suggests the good running of the office of the king, the prince, the ruler, gathering resources, exploiting things, so that the kingdom, etc., would be strong. However, despite the fact that the regents and Othon did many things in the field of administration, they didn't do many things on the field of economics. The National Bank of Greece, a private institution, was introduced in 1843, and it tried in the next couple of decades to introduce the drachma as a legal means of payment. And this was an achievement. But this happened in a very slow motion, and the truth is that the regents and Othon didn't do much for the monetary side of economic life. And this is because Greece was facing challenges, the Eastern question. It needed to have an army ready to fight, and the army needed resources. So the National Bank gave loans to the government, and therefore the drachma could not be convertible. There was an overissuance of drachmas, and until the late 19th century, convertibility was something that was demanded by economists of the times, but not introduced. Then we have another thing was that private property was very limited. Peasants did not have property rights, with the exception of certain families. And there was this demand that land be distributed to cultivators, but this took again decades. A big push was done in 1871 by Alexandros Koumondouros, and the second one, the great leap, was done by Eleftherios Venizelos in 1917. So in balance, I consider, for the reasons that I cite in the book, cameralism as not having favored the Greek economy. After 1862, French liberal thought becomes something that Greek economists of the times follow. Authors like Paul Leroy-Beaulieu are cited by them, and the two guys who do this are Ioannis Soutsos, professor of economics at the University of Athens, and Aristidis Economos, a reader at the University of Athens, both with law education. However, after 1890, I'm going to come back to this, German-trained economists enter the scene. Now, Ioannis Soutsos, he was a Phanariot Greek. He studied in Geneva, then in France. He came back to Greece in the mid-30s, a judge at the Supreme Court, and then professor for public economics. So he started teaching economics, and later his chair was renamed political economy. Now, in 1844, he did a very daring thing. He wrote a pamphlet demanding a constitution. He was the only intellectual in Greece who did this. And he demanded property rights for the peasants, a land register, so that the country would know where to cultivate and where not. And in this slide, you see his further works in 1851 and 68, and the economic issue in 1879, which is very important because Thessaly was to be assimilated into Greece. The Ionian Islands were given to Greece. And there was this need for expansion. And he was the one, together with economists, who argued in favor of a balanced budget, of making the economy stronger and then pursuing the great idea, instead of doing the opposite thing. But he was not listened to. Aristides Economos was, again, a judge who, with an interest in economics, he defended free trade against protectionist ideas, and was the editor of the first economic journal in Greece, Economiki Επιθεώρηση, Economic Review, for 17 years, every month, a journal that introduced economic thinking from all around the world to Greeks, together with business news, together with novel ideas. It was a great achievement, and Aristides Economos was therefore well known and was elected a member of parliament twice, where he opposed both Viligiannis and Trikoupis for their policies, which he saw as not contributing toward a strong economy. Again, the balanced budget was a big issue for him, and also the privileges given to the National Bank of Greece in order for the Bank of Greece to be, the National Bank of Greece to be given the privilege to issue money. Both men passed away in 1890, therefore were not present when Trikoupis famously declared bankruptcy, and then after, in 1897, the unfortunate Greek-Ottoman War followed. During this time, the last decade of the 19th century, Andreas Andreadis became a professor of public finance at the University of Athens. He did his studies in France, and his PhD in France was about the history of the Bank of England. He was the first scientist ever to write a history for the Bank of England. And this book remained a standard reference work until the interwar years, when a Briton wrote the history of the Bank of England. It was translated into English in 1909. Now, Andreadis was a liberal. He was very distant. He was very critical of government intervention. He wrote the history of Greek public finance from ancient times to the then present. And he concluded that in the course of time, governments do more and more spending, and this creates an unfortunate situation for the economy. He was a liberal, but he was working historically, meaning he was doing empirical research and not using abstract economic theory as the neoclassicals did or the classical school did. And it is very important, in my view, what he wrote in 1927 in a book written in German. The book was entitled The Economic Theory of the Present, and he wrote the book about Greece. And there he said, he gave information, and he said, there are many schools of economics, but Greeks should stand above these things. Greece needs an economic theory of its own. Therefore, we need to assist economists with a variety of ideas to be able to teach economics. And I remind you, this was the decade when the University of Thessaloniki was created, the High School for Economic and Commercial Studies was created, etc., etc. So he helped a first generation of economists to enter academic life. Eleftherios Venizelos was very instrumental because he introduced a Ministry for Agriculture that was not existent before him, Ministry of Transport. He modernized the state. He introduced social legislation and proceeded with land distribution. And on his left-hand side, politically, he had Papanastasiou, Alexandros Papanastasiou, who took his first degree in Greece, went to Berlin, studied next to Gustav Schmoller and Adolf Wagner, who were German historical school prominent economists. Upon his return to Greece, he founded the Sociological Society, and this society gathered many people who then became civil servants. So they were influenced by this spirit of intervention, promoting social policy whenever possible. Now, as I said, the economics degree was introduced, and Andreadis assisted a number of economists becoming academics, like Kyriakos Varvaresos, then Xenophon Zolotas and Demosthenis Stefanidis in Thessaloniki. Zolotas, after 3 years, returned to Athens, and at the commercial school, Dimitrios Kalitsounakis and Ioannis Tournakis. Now, I'm not sure if everybody is familiar with, I'm gonna say a couple of words, but allow me to say at this point that Demosthenis Stefanidis and Ioannis Tournakis at a later stage applauded Italian fascism and German National Socialism. Kalitsounakis, however, was a social democrat. He was very close to Venizelos. And Zolotas was a liberal economist. And Varvaresos was a practitioner, actually, with state socialist ideas. Then what happened, and is very interesting to note, is how economics was reproduced in the country. Because in order to become a professor, you needed to have an ephigesia, you needed to do a second thesis, and the law school of the University of Athens, meaning Varvaresos and Zolotas, were the ones that allowed people to take the title and then be eligible for appointments. And the law school of the University of Athens became dominant. All economists who came to either get appointed in Piraeus, at the industrial school in Piraeus, as it was called, in Thessaloniki, in all universities and higher schools in Greece, they had to have an ephigesia. Now, in the interwar period, we have the appearance of three distinct schools of thought, a liberal one, an interventionist one, and of course, a Marxist one. It is very interesting to note that when Keynes published his general theory in 1936, this was reviewed by Zolotas or Pindaros Christodoulos and other professors negatively. They objected to Keynesian theory because of the new vocabulary that was introduced, because Keynes was not supportive of savings and was pointing the finger on fiscal policy to achieve full employment. And by the way, left-leaning economists like Angelos Angelopoulos and Dimitrios Kalitsounakis were also opposed to Keynesian theory because their arguments were that, okay, what Keynes wants to do might be dangerous, and then it rectifies capitalism, and we want to move toward another economic system. So this is, by the way, in line with what was going on here in the United States. When Keynesian theory when Keynes published the book and the first reviews came out, they were negative. The Department of Economics at Harvard was negative about the New Deal. These things have been forgotten, but don't be surprised if you dig a bit deeper. Now, Dimitrios Kalitsounakis, I'm going to show his photograph right now. No, first comes Kyriakos Varvaresos, because next to being a governor, vice governor and then governor of the central bank, Bank of Greece, BOG, he started from the National Statistical Service of Greece. He was the one who represented Greece at the Bretton Woods Conference and other post-World War II conferences, and wrote the famous report on the Greek economy in 1952. Xenophon Zolotas had written a thesis about Greek industrialization, and there he used the historical method. He was, as I mentioned, a liberal, wanted to see the sphere of government intervention during interwar Greece diminishing, if possible, was against the productive works of Venizelos, but he was flexible. There were times in his career when he wrote things like, okay, yes, now we need some government intervention, of the right kind, of course. And this is the reason why some contemporary commentators pick up things he wrote in 1944 or 1947 and say, he was a socialist. He was not a socialist, but he's, according to circumstances and under certain conditions, he approved interventionist policies. This is Dimitrios Kalitsounakis, who spent from 10 years, from 1910 to 1920 in Berlin. His brother was professor of Greek language at the University of Berlin. And he was the one who, also Zolotas had the journal that he edited. He edited the Archive of Economic and Social Sciences. And in this journal, he started in 1935-36 to publish works of the British classical political economy tradition. He published works by Malthus, by David Ricardo, by John Stuart Mill. In 1948, it was the first time that The Wealth of Nations of Adam Smith was published in Greek, in a short version, but 1948. And all this was the work of Kalitsounakis, who was a supporter of Venizelos and politically rather center-left. But as I said, he was very critical of Keynes. Now, as we approach the post-World War period, we see that the British come to assist Greece, then the Americans, and they bring together Anglo-Saxon training and Anglo-Saxon thinking in economics. Zolotas is a very important figure in this. Panagis Papaligouras, known as the Ministry of Economic Coordination under Constantinos Karamanlis, a very well-known figure. Andreas Papandreou, who came invited by Constantinos Karamanlis to create KEPE and introduce planning in the Greek economy in the 1960s. Couple of words about KEPE. KEPE became what the law school of the Department of Economics in Athens was some decades before, because it opened itself to new economists who were hired, were working for the economic plan of Greece, and KEPE made sure, through assistance from the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, that these economists could go abroad and do PhDs, master's degrees and PhDs. And if you see the names, you will recognize in the book, I mean, I don't want to bother you with, bomb you with names, you will see that after 1971, most of the academic appointments were former KEPE employees who had come to the United States mostly, but also in Britain, at Manchester and elsewhere, and had done their PhDs. And again, during this period, the well-known camps, a liberal interventionist versus a structuralist dependency theory camp, emerged. Now, Zolotas, at an older age, the photograph, his magnum opus is Monetary Equilibrium and Economic Development, where he defends monetary stability as the absolute goal of economic policy to be achieved under any circumstances. He adopted monetarist ideas quite early. He wrote our economic problem. He wrote many, many things. I have written a book about Zolotas, if you're interested, back in 2008, I think. And then he started publishing about the global economy and the European unification and all that. And he became also prime minister in 1990, as you remember. This is Panagis Papaligouras with the cigarette. He was a heavy smoker, and unfortunately this cost him dearly. Next to his first degree, he got a PhD from the University of Geneva, and he was the one who sat with prominent economists in Geneva who were supporters of methodological individualism, of the free economy and social policy. His very close professor was Wilhelm Röpke, who was an ordo-liberal, a school of economics in Germany that combined the free market with social policy. Perhaps some of you know the concept social market economy, a totally unique German kind of thing. And this is what he tried to do. He was in favor of a realist liberalism, as he said, not 19th century liberalism. We don't care about, it's the free market above all. We care about people. We have social policy, but we can introduce social policy when we have the means, when we have the revenue to do so. We just don't spend money that we don't have. And he renamed his approach as radical liberalism in the 1970s. As you know, some of you may know, he had very close contacts with Ludwig Erhard, the architect of German monetary miracle, and later chancellor, and he developed a special friendship with these German economists. And then we have Andreas Papandreou, who did his PhD at Harvard and became a professor at various American universities. He came in 1960 back to Greece, developed a strategy of Greek economic development. This was the first book that Kepe published. And he wanted structural change in Greece. He wanted import substitution. He wanted more state intervention, more spending in human capital. And the Center Union, when it became a government, tried to follow these ideas, implement them into policies, but as we all know, these policies were defeated and the Center Union lost power. And then the dictatorship came. And then he was released from prison and was allowed to go to Sweden, then go to Canada, where he wrote the next two books and developed a more radical and heterodox approach to economics than the one that he espoused in the beginning of his career. His ideas in general combine analysis done by the periodical monthly review published in New York by Paul Sweezy and Harry Magdoff, and the dependency theory that was developed by Chicago economist who became a dissident of the Chicago school, Andre Gunther Frank. And this vision that Greece would become a socialist society, not resembling Western European ones, but not resembling the Soviet bloc either, would, be his dream. Now, after 1980, things change a little bit. With both camps, the liberal interventionist one and the structuralist camp, they adjust to the new circumstances, which is the Mediterranean financing and then European Union funds for conversion and for the support of any policy you can think of. After 1985, the anti-European Union rhetoric of Papandreou diminishes. The Marxists espouse state monopoly capitalism, a very popular theory among the Soviet in the Soviet camp to explain what went on during capitalism. And to cut a long story short, these three camps, two equally strong and one, the heterodox one, weaker but very vocal, nevertheless, walk together until the crisis, espousing their ideas. The crisis, as we all know, pushed the Greek growth model, which was the Papandreou model actually, to its limits. And then the crisis came. The literature after 2010 can be somehow subdivided into books and articles that accept the European Union realities and suggest that we should do as a Greek economy our best to comply with what our partners propose. There was a second there is a second group that analyzes the whole Eurozone crisis in terms of North versus South, rich North versus poor South, and why does the European Union not have a common fiscal policy like the United States has, where rich member states pay for less rich member states. And then, of course, a third camp which advocated the return to the drachma, but this was a very insignificant camp suggested by some people who were not even economists. And it was clear that if that desperate step would be taken, Greece would be far worse than it is now. Now, Greece, as the ambassador suggested in her opening remarks, has gone through a very significant crisis. Rebound was not V-shaped, as the economists say. It took almost 8 years. 2014 we had a positive GDP growth, and then 15, 16, again negative rates. But since then, we are doing as an economy far better, and we exited the memoranda, and we look optimistically to the future. Of course, there are problems. In 10 years or so, we will start repaying the loans that we have gotten, not simply interest rates, and we would have to accumulate primary surpluses. And of course, there is a demographics issue. Population is not growing to the extent needed to support the social security system, etc., etc. But let's not see the glass half empty, let's see it half full, and be optimistic and work towards a better Greek economy where the young generation will find good paid jobs, and some of you may want to return and work in Greece. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to
Now there is time for some questions if there are. Is there any question?
Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Michalis, and I used to work for USAID as an economic growth expert, working on commercial legal reform. And I'm very aware of, the Troika's, requirements for reform in the Greek economy, especially ones regarding competition policy. There was a massive amount of issues that were found and to be addressed by the Greek economy. I'm very curious, so many different schools of thought you've laid out over here, but there's this recent rise, phenomenal growth in the Greek economy compared with the other European countries. To what would you ascribe that growth to? Is it these reforms that Greece undertook? Was it just some kind of pent-up issue and dynamism in the Greek economy and the people that just pushed things forward? Please.
Okay. Thank you. This is a very important question, and I think that reforms undertaken in Greece have helped immensely certain sectors, but things still need to be done in terms of competition policy, for example. It's not only, we have to look at the markets and see if the markets work competitively or are oligopolies. And of course, an oligopoly wants to retain its profits or expand the profits does not want competitors in the game. However, competitors would help the Greek economy improve, open itself more, export more, which is a very important issue. And I think that our partners have helped us in the course of the last 10 years to adopt policies that are helpful. But of course, we shouldn't rely on partners, discuss among ourselves and agree about reforms that we need to introduce. I hope this is fair.
Professor, thank you so much for this. Dear Michali, thank you for this extensive and very comprehensive presentation. I sure learned a lot today. I have two questions, if you would indulge me. The first one has to do with taxation. And there is, arguably, there has been and there is a bit of a mistrust between the average taxpayer in Greece and the state. I was wondering whether in your extensive study of academic and other schools of thought, or just plain history, I mean, it's even argued that this might stem from the occupation times, Turkish, Ottoman, and so on, whether you have come to find reasons why this has been and still persists in your assessment. And the second question has to do with the most recent crisis that Greece underwent between 2010 and, say, 2018, 2020. What I'd like to ask is whether, in your assessment, this crisis has already or has the potential to change how Greeks position themselves on issues of fiscal management or prudence, let's call it this way, and the role / the size of the public sector in Greece. So whether this is, in a sense, laying the seeds for the views of the Greek citizens on this issue to change down the road compared to the last 30, 40, 50 years. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. You are right. Taxation in Greece, in independent Greece, carried forward the Ottoman system for a very long time. And then the Ottoman system was substituted with taxation on animals that were helping peasants cultivate the land. The more animals you had, the more cows that is, the more tax you paid. Now imagine a factory paying a tax because it has machines. Okay? A totally backward kind of policy. So Greek economists during that period were in favor of progressive taxation, progressive income taxation. And income taxation was introduced in Greece in 1909 and then reintroduced in 1918. And this legislation was carried forward and was reformed in 1955. And since then we have a policy of stop and go with certain things, assist those who invest, those who bring in foreign currency, etc., etc. So the tax system is very complicated, and many authors describe it as unjust because, okay, salary earners pay taxes, but okay, businesses might avoid taxes because they reinvest their profits or whatever. And there is not a comprehensive tax system. Nowadays, as you know, taxation, revenue depends also on real estate and the ENFIA, the tax on land, on dispossessions. So we definitely need a more just tax system in Greece, and we need to work toward this. However, changes in the tax system might create political imbalances, and nobody wants political imbalances. So it is difficult, but we need to look at it going forward, no doubt.
Thank you for your lecture, very enlightening. Two questions that I want to get your opinion on. In my way of thinking, there's two critical elements that would affect the Greek economy. One, the negative population growth, the low birth rate that you already hinted at, and how it affects the social security system. The other is the rich natural resources that are still looking for exploitation. So how do these two issues, in your view, would affect the future of our economy?
Thank you for your question, because it makes me answer with an example. Greece has a very, very favorable climate, has the sun, and of course winds due to islands and etc., etc. Greece should actually be a pioneer in green energy. But you see that wherever businesses are trying to introduce these kinds of investments, there is a popular discontent about them. And the government is doing its best, but reforms in that direction, unfortunately, don't get supported so much by intellectuals, academics, people who look forward, who know what's going on globally, and therefore very small steps are taken in that direction. And the same is true about demographics, the first issue that you referred to. Everybody knows the problem. You can calculate it if you add what the husband earns, the wife earns, and then the cost of raising 1, 2 children. Even one child is, brings you to the limits. And although everybody knows it, there is no planning for, say, daycare, where you can send your child. There are there are public daycare facilities, but mostly private. And nobody is so rich, not everyone is so rich to be able to pay. So we need more insistence, not simply saying we know this is coming towards us. If it's coming towards us, let's prepare and do something about it.
Thank you very much, Michali, about your presentation. We learned a lot tonight. I just wanted to ask you whether you see any changes in economic thought in Greece as we went through the pre-crisis levels, the pre-crisis economy, into the crisis, the debt crisis, and then dealing with the crisis and having Syriza and now New Democracy governing the country. Do you see any change in economic thought because of these experiences, which are different from period to period?
I don't see big differences. People stick to what they think, especially those who oppose the European Union approach, but conform to European Union realities because they know without European Union assistance, Greece would be far worse off. Okay? I could quote the American example. After the financial crisis of 2008, there were very well-known academics in the United States who admitted that they had simplified things and they were following certain ideas, and this was wrong. I'm talking about Richard Posner, for example, who said, "Sorry, I was very critical about Keynes, but I hadn't read Keynes. But now I have, and I think he has some points, and we need a synthesis in policy, blah, blah, etc. Now, in Greece, we don't have this kind of courage. And many people who wrote in the past, things supporting Andreas Papandreou, for example, now they support totally different things without them acknowledging the leap that they made. Apologies for being a little taking longer to answer, but so on written paper, I haven't seen big differences in economic law. But it's also a very short time. I mean,
nevertheless, Greece is doing better now
absolutely.
in the last 25 years, I suppose.
Well, we haven't reached back the income level of 2010, but we are moving toward it. And yeah.
Going back to your main theme of the development of economic growth in Greece, I was curious if you could share with us your assessment. Which strand of thought do you think had the greatest impact on Greece's growth trajectory? Was it perhaps post-1945? Was it perhaps a decade of the 60s? So I'm looking for a relationship that you could perhaps have established. Which type of economic thought was more, let's say, produced greater effects in terms of economic growth?
Well, in the post-World War II period, it's clear that the years from 53, 55 to 1975 were years of growth with high growth with low inflation. And then growth rates fell during the Papandreou years. And inflation was double digit. But the policies of Andreas Papandreou were more socially inclusive. So he won elections in '85, he won again in 1993. So it's very difficult to set aside a certain period because also international developments change. The years of high growth of the Karamanlis and Zolotas Papaligouras period were years of stability all over the world, whereas after the oil crisis in the mid-70s, inflation went up and stagflation entered the scene, which was a very new phenomenon. And economists didn't have initially an explanation about it. So we will keep searching. I understand from reading the IMF staff papers that historical investigations in inflation, etc., are quite popular among the research department of the IMF. So I'm hoping that we Greek economists will step up and do similar comparative studies for the Greek economy.
That's exactly why I posed the question, because I was thinking, as you were developing this very elaborate description, how ironic it is that Greece's economists are very well known. I mean, I don't think Greek economics ought as much to be jealous of. And I'm thinking about contemporary economists, Zolotas being number one. But then I was also thinking that with so many Greek students studying abroad in Anglo-Saxon universities and having gone back to Greece to contribute, whether in the private sector or public sector, do I have any evidence to suggest that the economic crisis of 2010 could be averted just because there was a lot more, a greater variety of economic thought and more influences from abroad. So, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, Michali. Ήταν καταπληκτική η παρουσία. I would like to ask a question related to the gap, the human capital gap, the revenue gap actually in Greece, and whether the economists in Greece are addressing, analyzing this issue, and if they are proposing smart policies to address it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the thing is, yes, there are economists who are addressing this issue. There are economists suggesting support of startup companies and all that, but sometimes you don't find an audience. Your voice is not heard. If you are an academic, you work toward writing papers, improving your CV, etc. And the field of politics is left to certain people who love politics and cherry pick from the work of economists and suggest partial things. You're absolutely correct that we need to do more in that direction. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's take two last questions.
Thank you. Hi, Psalidopoulos of the U.S. Department of Treasury. You closed your remarks on a positive note, glass half full, that we have an opportunity this decade, and then at the end we will start repaying capital, not just well-managed interest on our debt. What evidence are you seeing that we're taking advantage of this decade? The RRF money, European money, new investment flows, do you see them being absorbed in the right sectors, most productive and expert-driven sectors or not? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, but this is a very difficult question. Keynes famously said that we economists should be rather dentists than preachers. Try to do good, relieve pain, and instead of simply stating things and not doing anything. We see progress, but we are afraid because the crisis hit Greece so hard that we are afraid that something might go wrong and we will find ourselves in a dire situation. We should be alert and keep going, but we cannot do miracles. In a democracy, we have to find consensus and all that. And this is a big challenge. I fully agree.
Any last question? There was some Somebody wanted to ask something? So, Professor Michalis, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you so much, all of you. And now we have a small reception with some wine and some food for you. It was a great pleasure having you all tonight with us. And I think it was a great pleasure and a privilege having Dean Michalis.
I'm
Thank you so much.